48 hours to break as many old silly laws as we can. Are you in?
I'm not scared.
Great, let's go.
We had to break old laws that hadn't been done before, and I thought I would start with a penny farthing. Under the 1896 Red Flag Act,
the name of this act is not the Red Flag Act 1896. The actual name of the act is the Locomotives on Roads Act 1865. The Red Flag Act is just a nickname.
it's a legal offence for any self-propelled machine.
The act also does not specify self-propelled machines. It says locomotives, including vehicles propelled by steam or any other than animal power,
to travel faster than 4 miles an hour.
Moreover, this act isn't even in force anymore. 1896 is in fact the year it was repealed, and the speed limit raised to 14 miles per hour by the Locomotives on Highways Act of that year. The Road Traffic Act of 1932 then raised it again to 30.
And to make my law breaking as authentic as possible, why not use a self-propelled machine they may well have been using the time this law was written? The penny farthing.
Bicycles were very much not what this act was intended to cover. The act was introduced by those in the horse-drawn carriage industry wanting to limit the fledgling automotive industry. Not to mention, the act was passed into law in 1865, about 6 years before the invention of the penny farthing.
And it seemed like the fact we were speeding in a self-propelled machine didn't seem to bother the police one bit.
There's a very good reason why the police aren't very interested. It's because what you're doing is not illegal.
To break this one, I'd need some rope and a plank of wood. Under Section 54 of the Metropolitan Police Act 1839, without the intention of unloading or loading into a vehicle, it is illegal to carry any timber, plank, or bar of wood along a footway.
Believe it or not, this law is actually not as silly as it sounds. First of all, planks are only one of a list of things that this law forbids you from carrying along a footway. Also specified in the same subsection are casks, tubs, hoops, wheels, ladders, poles, showboards, and placards. And it also, for that matter, forbids you from rolling them, not just carrying them. There is also a very good reason why this is illegal. It's to prevent people from obstructing the pavement with their bulky loads. One thing that is definitely inaccurate, though, is that it does not specify bars of wood, and timber is only mentioned in other subsections that create different offences.
That's exactly what I'm going to do. Let's walk the plank. Come on, boy.
What Max is doing here is dragging the plank of wood behind him, which arguably this particular law doesn't actually prohibit, since it doesn't specifically prohibit dragging it behind you on a string. Whether some other law prohibits dragging things along the pavement with a string is beyond my current research capabilities.
My next crime took me to the post office. Under the 1904 Postal Services Act,
In my research, I could not find a Postal Services Act of 1904. The law which Max is referring to here is in fact found in the Post Office Act 1908, so I haven't the foggiest idea where he got 1904 from.
it's against the law to distract and interfere with a postal worker.
Here Max has got the wording wrong. The wording of the law is not distracting and/or interfering with a postal worker, it is willfully obstructing an officer of the post office in the execution of his duty, or obstructing the course of business of a post office.
And therefore a criminal offence to talk to them for too long.
Hello, mate.
Hello, mate.
How long is your route normally? I've always wondered.
Depends on how much I've got in there.
Yet again, I don't think that what Max is doing here is actually illegal as he says it is. What he's doing here is simply striking up a friendly conversation with a postal worker. Now, my research capability is somewhat limited by my access to legal documents being limited, but since Max let the postman and the post office worker go about their day, I somehow doubt it would fall under interference or willful obstruction.
There is a law that says you're not allowed to trespass. That makes total sense. Unless you are climbing a tree to point at a fish.
Again, Max is here leaving out details to make this law seem weirder than it is. First of all, this is a bylaw which applies only to Cornwall. Secondly, it only applies to hewers and bulkers, to wit, people who pointed towards schools of fish so that fishing boats could catch them. And 3, that bylaw is intended to cover cliffs, not trees. I must also point out, this bylaw is incredibly old. So old, in fact, that the only references I could actually find to it were second-hand. The very earliest reference I could find to this bylaw was in a newspaper from the 19th century. So I would have said that Max is technically doing something illegal here, were it not for...
Now please remember, Alex is a friend of mine that I knew would be okay with me doing this, so don't go around trying this yourself.
If Alex was okay with Max being on his property, then it wouldn't be trespass, because he then has an implied license to be on that property. Not to mention, I also discovered
There is a law that says you're not allowed to trespass.
Trespass isn't even in itself a criminal offence, it's a civil one, so it's only illegal in specific scenarios such as aggravated trespass.
Under the Licensing Act of 1872, it's an offence to be drunk in charge of a horse, a cow, or a steam engine. So, time to break another law. Drunk in control of a cow.
Come on.
Final law in the books.
Just we quite pissed.
This is probably going to be the most tenuous inaccuracy I've ever pointed out, but are you really in charge of the cow if you have a sober friend there with you who is clearly in control of the situation? Not to mention, it doesn't really matter because the Licensing Act also prohibits you from being drunk in a public place at all. That's all the inaccuracies for Max's video. Let's move on to Zach's.
48 hours starting now. Hit me with a kite. Law number 1, recklessly flying a kite. That's 1-0, Max.
Flying a kite in public is only illegal if it causes annoyance to inhabitants or passengers.
And for my second law, I was heading to
France.
the home of baguettes, romance, and the missing ingredient for my law. And for this law, it's illegal to bring a snail on a train without a ticket.
My knowledge of the French legal system is somewhat limited, but from what I could gather, this particular law doesn't specifically cover snails. It's much more broad than that, applying to any animal that weighs less than 6 kilograms. So while a snail technically falls under that, it's not really what the law was supposed to be targeting.
This next law is all about onions. Now, in France, if you're carrying onions on the street, you legally have right of way.
I tried my very best with the resources I had, and for the life of me, I could not find any source for this bit about carrying onions in Paris. Until somebody in the comments section can point out the very specific law which says exactly that, I'm going to chalk this one up to either misunderstanding of another law or complete fabrication.
This is Piggy and Pepper, but not for long, as I'm going to change their name. You see, I found these two on Facebook Marketplace for €150, and after a few strange DMs with the owner, she agreed to help me break this next law.
Are you ready to change your name?
But before I could do this, I needed to buy the pig.
Thank you.
And now I owned Piggy, it was time to break the law.
I hereby swear in this very field today. New name, Oh, how do you spell Napoleon?
Yep, that's right. It's illegal to name a pig Napoleon.
The factoid that French law makes it illegal to name your pet pig Napoleon is completely false, as is the claim that it's in the Code Civil. There was a law from 1881 that made it illegal to be rude about the president, but that law does not specifically talk about naming pigs anything in particular, let alone Napoleon. Speaking of whom, that law only refers to current heads of state, not past ones, and it was also struck down in 2013 to boot.
I'm in Trafalgar Square because apparently it's illegal to feed the pigeons bread.
The Act itself is not what makes feeding the pigeons illegal. The Act gives the Greater London Authority the power to make bylaws, and it's those bylaws that make pigeon feeding illegal.
I'm toast. On to the next law. Now, the Town Police Clauses Act of 1947 states that it's illegal to hang your clothes in public.
The wording is not in public, the wording is across any street. And for the record, it also defines street as road, square, court, alley, and thoroughfare or public passage, and other parts of the Act specify footways.
Right, so while Max is in control of the cow committing his crime, mine is if I stop a cattle on the street for the purpose of cleaning, that's not legal.
This is yet another law where I couldn't actually find any evidence of it actually existing, and believe me, I did try. And since UK common law states that if something is law, it will be found in our books, we can assume that in the absence of any evidence to the contrary, that this law does not actually exist at all. And that is all for this long overdue new episode of All the Inaccuracies. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your patience in waiting for a new video after, what, a year? Leave a comment whether you liked it or not, it means a lot to me in any case. Leave a like, a share, a subscribe, all that stuff the algorithm likes, and until next time, ta-ta!